All right, this is part two of the video about the problem of evil and the Christian worldviews on this. Again, I'm I'm angling this argument right now against evangelical branches of Christianity, those who are young Earth creationists, especially who deny evolution and truths of science, and they have a theory that God has there was no death before Adam and Eve, and they take a very literal view on some of these points, and they argue the omni God and why it needs to be an all knowing, all powerful, all loving God. And where I see some problems with this and the problem of suffering, and we'll get into miracles and things like that too in some of these video series. Um, but it's obvious looking at the fact that there are there's examples of wars and cruelty and violence and a lot of species beyond humans. And I'm approaching this with sensitivity as well. I know that losing a loved one is deeply painful and very difficult. I lost my own father and my brother, and when they died, I experienced the stages of grief, the sadness, the depression, and anger for many years. And so I do care a lot about this issue myself. However, I don't personally feel like this is the problem of suffering is an argument against God existing at all or making it impossible for God to exist. And I'll get into that later. Inspiring philosophy uses the analogy with Doctor Strange in the Marvel movie Infinity War, comparing it to God's omniscience. Doctor Strange can see all these possibilities of the future, as many of you are aware of. And I agree with Michael Jones on this. Inspiring philosophy, there could be the possibility of a God, and I argue it doesn't have to be an omniscient God, but being wise enough to know there are many possibilities, and this is the best of possible worlds, or is it? And so we'll get through some of these arguments. And I do think it's pretty interesting some of Alvin Plantinga's arguments, the free will defense that's quoting here. And he references to pages 166 and 167 in The Nature of Necessity. And Paul Draper is quoted saying, "Some serious attempts have been given that show evil is logically compatible with God's existence. Alvin Plantinga's free will defense has persuaded many." And I would agree as well that there are arguments, but doesn't necessarily have to be an omni God. Moral agency and free will is not possible without consequences of good and evil, and I would agree with that point. These are some points that I do agree with, that it is more valuable to have a moral good and a moral evil in the sense that you have free will. I personally don't believe there's a possibility of having a world with free will without having good and evil, and that's not an issue for me in this. And because less valuable is the only moral good is allowed, that's not true freedom, and that's not good either. That to me is not a loving or good God. So let's hit on this point. I want to end this video on this slide here. He brings up this point from Epicurus. One, if God is all good, then he wants to stop evil. And these are arguments laid out by classic atheism or arguments against God. Two, if God is all powerful, then he can stop evil. Three, there is evil, and that's a fact. We've established that. I don't think there's any denial of that, that the evils of the world and there is needless suffering. And then the full part four of that argument is, therefore, there is not an all powerful and all good God. And I have a double argument against that. Not only do I think that's an effective argument against God, because I think there could still be a God, a creator, or some highly intelligent being that's universally creating or panspermia, planting life on worlds without being an all knowing or all powerful or all loving, all good God. And so I don't see the need for God to be all powerful, all knowing, or all good. I'll get into Yuval Noah Harari's book, Homo Deus, and the scientific possibilities of many things and evolve life on other worlds. So stay with us, and we want to continue on with this discussion on the problem of evil. Thank you for joining us today, and please share and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Thank you.